All right, check the mic. We are live, week 15, in between all of the 1 and 4 o'clock games and Sunday Night Football. Packers, Seahawks in just a little bit. But as always, instant reaction to what we've seen so far in week 15. Sam, we just saw, let's start right now. The Lions and the Bills, 48-42. Bills get the win here. Looks like the Lions had a chance at the onside kick, but they missed it, man. So close.
Didn't get it. They came out of the pile. Taron Johnson had the ball. Detroit ball. Who knows who had it at the bottom of the pile when they started the fighting, but he's the guy that came away with it at the end. Huge scoring game. This was like the Bills came away on the good side of this. Last week it was the same game as the Rams game, except Detroit was the Bills in this scenario, and the Bills were the Rams, right? That Detroit's defense just could not stop Josh Allen. The Bills basically all game. Every time they needed a play, Josh Allen made the play. Even right at the end, he's making multiple plays and getting undone by penalties, false starts, holding calls. Like this, in addition to last week, is the kind of game that is going to win Josh Allen MVP.
Oh, yeah. 362 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, another 2 touchdowns on the ground with 68 yards. James Cook with a couple big runs and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, you're right. Last week, the Rams kept getting up. And every time the Bills got within a score, the Bills, the Rams tacked another one on. That was the Bills, right? Every time the Bills get up 14-0, then it's 21-7, 21-14, 28-14, 35-14. So at one point, it did look like the Bills might run away with it a little bit, but the Lions kept chipping away to the point where it's 48-35. They score that final touchdown with 12 seconds left. Can't get the onside kick, as we said. But yeah, this is the type of game people love. I said, hey, this would be my favorite Super Bowl. Would love to see a rematch in the Super Bowl between these two teams. The Bills looks like the better team. We come away with that takeaway. They looked like the better team today, but I still think they're pretty evenly matched. And game flow changes. Like if they played in the Super Bowl right now, this year, it could be 20-17 for all we know. Game flow changes, but in this one, the Bills had a lot of answers, especially offensively.
Yeah, I mean, it's also Detroit are going to get some players back before that far, if they make it that far, including potentially, Aiden Hutchinson. Who knows? That was the kind of time scale they were putting on him. But I mean, it was at home, right? It was in Detroit. It was at Ford Field. So for Buffalo to go and be basically unstoppable on offense in this game, I think was huge. The game couldn't have started much better for them, right? Like they forced Detroit out pretty early. They scored. They got another one. They, like you said, game flow, things started immediately in Buffalo's favor. If things start immediately in Detroit's favor, maybe it's a different game. But yeah, that was a big statement win that Buffalo was able to bounce back from a game like last week, that they were able to hold, one of the best offenses in the NFL slightly better than they managed against the Rams, at least get a stop here or there. Whereas the Lions, for the first time, really this season, right, that defense finally exposed them a little bit, or was exposed a little bit, and the offense, couldn't quite keep pace with what Buffalo was doing.
So Bill's still alive for that number 1 overall seed. Things get interesting now with Detroit. Technically, if Minnesota wins tomorrow night, they'll be tied for the top of the NFC North, and they still play each other back, in Week 18. So battle for the number 1 seed in the NFC. That puts let's just work backwards. All the big games are at the 4 o'clock hour. So Philadelphia gets their win. They move to 12-2. So now they're tied with Detroit record-wise for that number 1 overall seed. Eagles 27, Steelers 13. I thought it was a good battle. But again, coming off of a lot of talk about the Eagles pass game not being good last week. Well, they destroyed last week's total of 83 passing yards. Jalen Hurts goes 25 of 32 for 290, 2 touchdowns, no picks, including, a lot early on where the Eagles came out firing.
Yeah, both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith over 100 yards. I mean, those are their 2 big receivers, particularly with no Dallas Goedert there. Those are the guys that should be getting the ball. That's the passing game, right? It's Jalen Hurts to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and then maybe sprinkle in a throw to a running back every now and again, or a target to a tight end like Calcaterra. So the passing game functioned, and the run game still functioned. Okay, Saquon Barkley didn't go for like $150 the way he's been going for the last few weeks, but Jalen Hurts popped up with almost 50 yards. Saquon Barkley had his. Kenneth Gainwell made a couple plays. Generally, the offense did really well against a really good Pittsburgh defense.
Yeah, and I would say another really good performance by the Eagles defense. The Steelers never really got into any kind of flow offensively. They did get back into it 17-13, but one score game. Najee Harris drops the pitch and Eagles recover. And that was pretty much it after that.
Yeah.
Still might have some voice cracks in here, Sam, here. And voice is mostly back from what it was on Friday. But, we'll see what happens going forward. But yeah, another impressive defensive outing by the Eagles. And we'll say this for 4 teams now. The Steelers have this 3 games in 11 days. TJ Watt comes up hurt toward the end.
Yeah. Voice is back. The rest of you might be breaking down, but the voice is still okay. Okay, let's pick up with the injury thing. You're right. Multiple significant players left with injuries this week. You had A.J. Brown going down in that Philadelphia game. They're not one of the teams, right, with the 3 games in 10 days thing. But Pittsburgh have T.J. Watt comes up limping on one of those plays. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes gets rolled his ankle. The whole bottom end of him got crunched down by a Browns defensive lineman as he's trying to throw from a messy pocket. It's supposedly another high ankle sprain like he played through before in a playoff run. We're not in a playoff run, so and 3 games in 10 days. It's pretty crappy timing from his perspective to have this. I would suspect he plays anyway, just based off his history, but definitely not exactly going to have a ton of rest on that bad ankle.
Mahomes has played through a lot of injuries, particularly the ankle. Particularly ankle injuries. Had that earlier this year that he battled through, a little bit different, but he started to get hit a lot toward the end. The Chiefs, we can talk about that quickly. The Chiefs win 21-7. Needed that to, keep that extra game in between them and the Bills. And it was kind of ugly too, because the Browns kept throwing the ball to them, but only 21 points for the Chiefs offense. Couldn't really put the game away toward the end, kind of let the Browns back into it, but still get the win to move to 13-1. The key here, though, they come back against the Texans on Saturday, and then they have the even shorter rest for the Christmas Day game against the Steelers. So keep an eye on Mahomes, keep an eye on Watt. And then when we get there, Patrick Surtain, same thing. Thursday night game now for the Broncos. He leaves on like his last play, second to last play of the game.
And for the other, for Mahomes, I mean, all of those teams that he's playing in this 10-day stretch are good pass rushing teams, right? And this is this team, Kansas City, with a problem spot at left tackle, whether they put in a rookie, whether they put in a substandard left tackle, whether they're waiting on the hamstring injury of DJ Humphries, or they play with left guard Joe Thuney playing left tackle, which was the solution today and the solution that they've done previously. And asking Joe Thuney, one of the better left guards in the NFL, to play left tackle against Myles Garrett is just a nightmare of a scenario. He did okay relative to other tackles, but he was struggling. The teams you mentioned, right? Those are all teams that can bring pass rushes. If Mahomes is encumbered with a bad ankle, can't really move the way he usually does, you're putting him out there with an obvious bullseye on a left tackle spot, whoever it is, and a guy that can't escape those plays necessarily. That's risky. I wonder if they rest him certainly for one of those games and try and get him at a better state.
All right, let's go to the Denver game. Again, the 4:00 window, almost every game means a lot. Broncos 31, Colts 13. Colts had this in hand for quite a while, but one of the biggest plays of the weekend, obviously, Jonathan Taylor, which should have been a 40. What did he end up with? 40-yard run. As I wrote in my notes, 41-yard touchdown, Jonathan Taylor. And then you come back and realize, nope, he did it too, Sam. Dropped the ball at the goal line. Instead of going up 2 scores, the Colts are up just 1 score. Broncos end up running away with it.
Yeah, and this was one where nobody even knew about it until it was taking a while, right? He scored, everyone celebrates, and then it's like, hey, how come we haven't kicked an extra point yet? What's going on? It's like they're still looking at it. And eventually it was like, oh, look, they're looking to see if he dropped the ball before the goal line, and concluded that he did. I don't understand.
No one understands. No one understands.
It's the single most stupid play in football. Like, just hold on to it a little bit longer, right? Would it kill you to run it 2 yards into the end zone? Because the thing
I almost feel better about Jordan Battle doing it because he was just switching. He didn't stupidly drop it. He was merely switching it into the other hand before the goal line, right? Jonathan Taylor, like everyone else, just drops it. What is he doing?
Yeah, Jordan Battle lost the handle on the ball whilst preparing to celebrate, whereas Jonathan Taylor dropped the ball in celebration before he'd actually scored the touchdown. It is definitely an important distinction and incrementally more stupid. This was the perfect example because he didn't even think he'd done it, right? Like it took him sort of waiting and watching the replays, and it dawned on him, oh no, did I actually drop this before the end zone? If you're cutting the margin that fine, then just run it further. Like, you know what I mean? It's so dumb. I do not get it.
That's why I said when I'm GM, I'll train my guys. You run the last 10 yards. You have to run through the entire end zone. I think that actually gets to the psychology of it. Maybe the voice is back. That's what happened. My cough just blew it. The psychology of it is I'm done, right? I made it to the end zone. The fact that he didn't even realize it, we could break it down more tomorrow. I'm sure we will. But maybe that's part of the psychology of it. Like your brain just turns off and says, hey, I did the thing I'm supposed to do. I scored the touchdown, but it's just too early, obviously. So that ended up being, I mean, we talked about this game. If the Broncos were going to get caught for one of those wild card spots, and if the Colts are going to be one of the teams catching them, this is as big of a playoff leverage game as any this week. So the Broncos end up getting the win. Their defense, really incredible. As of right now, the number one scoring defense because of the way the Chargers got beat up Broncos are now number one in the NFL. So they deserve the win. But it's hard to not look back at that Jonathan Taylor play and think about the Colts would have been up 2 scores and how much playoff leverage, forget win probability, just playoff leverage did he drop at the goal line on his way in.
And because it was like the perfect storm of a nightmare play, they were going to go up 20-7 with that score. Instead, not only does he drop it and not get the score, but because it fumbled through the end zone, it becomes Broncos ball. It's still 13-7. Later on the game, it's like a 13-24 game in Denver's favor. Like the Colts should have had 20 points on the board. Like even right at the death when it's still getting away from them, they should have been right in this with a 1-score game. Like a catastrophic play for no gain and just utter stupidity from, that was also, by the way, he had like a 2-year streak of not fumbling the football. Like what a way to lose that, just dropping it over the end zone.
I mean, the other huge play in that game, I want to, again, to give the Broncos credit, the Colts try this trick play. They do the throwback to A.D. Mitchell, who looked like he was sitting there reading the Wilson football and spinning the seams, and the throwback, Nick Bonito with his second pick six in a couple weeks here for Nick Bonito. It was really a fumble 6 because it was a throwback, but another incredible play by the Broncos defense and poorly designed, or just, not even designed, just slow by the Colts, and a huge play for the Broncos as they end up, like I said, running away with it against the Colts.
I don't know if there's a quarterback and wide receiver in the NFL right now with as little chemistry as A.D. Mitchell and Anthony Richardson. So, of course, what you should do is combine them on a trick play where they throw it back and forth to each other, because that's been so successful just going in one direction, right? No, let's combine the flow of footballs in both directions and see if that somehow improves the process. No, actually what it does is, turbocharge the misery and have it end up as a pick 6, fumble 6, however you want to describe it, an interception returned all the way for a touchdown. Okay, trick plays when they go wrong are always like, that was obviously a stupid decision. This one does feel like a problem you might have seen coming, though, just from the previous iteration of every pass that's gone from Richardson to A.D. Mitchell.
And I would say maybe one of the most surprising outcomes, the other 4:00 game that, had playoff implications, Tampa Bay, 40-17 over the Chargers. Looked like a shootout early on. Chargers got up. They stormed down the field. The Bucs came back. Baker had one of those early interceptions. It's a good Chargers defense. And then, man, Tampa Bay's offense, man. I mean, Bucky Irving, another 117 yards on the ground. They finished with over 220 rushing yards. And then Baker Mayfield dropping dimes. Mike Evans making big plays. Really impressive job by the Bucs offense against the number one scoring defense coming into the week.
Yeah, I mean, Baker and the Bucs are single-handedly responsible for the Chargers not being the number one scoring defense anymore. They single-handedly moved them off the top spot with this game. amazing. Like the second half from Tampa Bay, they were absolutely phenomenal. The offense, everything was functioning. The defense, particularly Levante David, old man David back there, every time he went on the blitz, he seemed to be coming away from the play with Justin Herbert's ankles. Just a phenomenal performance by Tampa Bay. I did not really see this one coming. I don't know that I thought they had this performance in them, but that was a hell of a win.
Especially early on, right? I mean, it's like you could get a little bit against the Chargers. The Chiefs did it last week. They scored early. Chargers defense, though, had been really tough throughout much of the season, outside of maybe the Ravens game. But the Bucs took it to them in the second half, including, again, the run game, like I said. But Baker throwing an absolute missile to Mike Evans for the second touchdown. The first one was more Mike Evans weaving through the defense for 57 yards. They got Jalen McMillan involved. Nice little pick play for his another touchdown from him, his third in 2 weeks. So yeah, the pass game was excellent from Tampa Bay. The run game was just as good, and the defense, it looked like the Chargers offense was going to have their success early on. Ladd McConkey was back, but Tampa Bay's defense cracked down, and really impressive job. And this was their toughest remaining game. They got 3 more games to clinch things in the NFC South. Now that they're past the Chargers, game and a half up on the Falcons, and they've got the road to win the division again.
Yeah, I mean, this was a statement that they can be a good team and actually do some damage if they make the playoffs through that division.
All right, we're working backward through the 1:00 games here. We already talked a little bit of Chiefs Browns. How about the Bengals get the win over the Titans, 37-27? This game had 10 turnovers. I don't know what the total was for turnovers in the week, but it felt like a record. Didn't this feel like a banner week for just overall turnovers, Sam? This game had 10 just between the Bengals and Titans.
It had 10 turnovers and I think 25 penalties. So, Scott Hansen on Red Zone was like, you want to know why this game is still going? Well, because it had 10 turnovers and 25 penalties, which tends to stop the clock a little bit. And of course, we witnessed the end of the Will Levis era, probably. Bunch of turnovers, didn't play well. One of them was unlucky. It was off the hand of his receiver, albeit not an amazing ball location. But he didn't play particularly well. Mason Rudolph did spark something as he came in. Late in the game, there's a lot of garbage time yardage in here when Cincinnati kind of had it in control. But then we started to see Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, like what those guys can do if you actually give them the ball in a functioning offense.
Oh, I mean, Pollard ended up, he didn't get the rushing projection for me from Prize Picks, but he's run the ball well. Spears catching the ball out of the backfield. He had 87 yards and a touchdown. If Tennessee gets some other pieces, those guys could be a nice little 1-2 punch. But yeah, Will Levis, the stat line, 8 of 12 for 89 yards and 3 picks. So 3 picks on 12 pass attempts, getting benched. Mason Rudolph taking over. It does feel like that could be it. And Tennessee confirming they're in the Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, whoever else you want to look at in the NFL draft. They're right there at 3-11 and looking for their next quarterback come draft time. Bengals still keeping that small percentage chance of maybe making it to the playoffs. And with the Chargers loss, 2 games behind the Chargers, but without the tiebreaker, more and more what ifs, I think, for Cincinnati as they look back through their season, where the offense looked good again, even despite Joe Burrow turning the ball over a few times.
Yeah, but I think we've seen previously like the limitations. This was a team where Tennessee wasn't really able to challenge a bad Bengals defense, but other teams have been able to and more than challenge them.
And probably the biggest 1:00 game, Houston Texans 20-12 over the Miami Dolphins. Texans moved to 9-5. Dolphins moved to 6-8. Same place where Cincinnati is. Same question for the Dolphins, right? Like as soon as they started to show life over these last few weeks, we said, yeah, it's against New England. It's against the Raiders. It's against the Jets. Lose to the Packers in the middle of that. Lose to the Texans now. Dolphins still not beating good teams. Texans defense really making a statement. Probably the worst game we've seen from Tua in quite a while. Derek Stingley with 2 interceptions, including the essentially game-clinching interception. Impressive job by Houston's defense.
Stingley makes the most spectacular interceptions I can think of any corner in the NFL right now. Like all of his picks seem to be of the highest difficulty level, like over his shoulder, tracking a ball, wide receiver style, contested with a wide receiver, not even just, tracking a ball in open space where you have to come down with it in a difficult catch, like actually beating a wide receiver to that catch. I mean, Tyreek Hill had that ball And Stingley
Yeah.
with like a second stab took it away from him, ripped it away on the way down. Amazing play by him, and yeah, ended the game for them. Same Miami Dolphins, right? Houston's defense got after them. They were able to pressure them. Stingley makes the play at the end, but they just weren't able to make enough plays on offense, Miami.
2 touchdowns for Nico Collins. And, even though the stat line wasn't, jumping off the page for CJ Stroud, 18 of 26 for 131, couple throwback CJ Stroud type of plays where I thought, again, stats weren't great, but I'm like, all right, I had lost a little confidence in Stroud over these last couple of weeks. It felt like he was a little bit of a throwback to what he looked like, all the optimism that we had for him his rookie season. So I think that bodes well. They're going to they play Kansas City with the short rest coming up this week.
Yeah, there was some really nice plays by him in this game.
The other wild one, Washington 20-19 over the Saints. Commanders moved to 9-5. They really needed this one to solidify their playoff positioning. Looked like they had the game in hand. The Saints snuck back into it with Cedric Wilson hitting Alvin Kamara to get within 10. It was 17-0. That pass got them back on track. And then Spencer Rattler came in to lead the Saints comeback, in a failed 2-point conversion confirmed the win for Washington.
Yeah, insane that it got this close. I mean, Washington should have had this game well in hand. They were making plays even at the end, sort of trying to chew up the clock. I mean, Jaden Daniels was 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 when they were trying to keep the clock moving. They ran like a read option play. Daniels kept it, and then it was in trouble. Had to like dive over the first down line. They end up giving the ball back to New Orleans eventually, and the Saints were able to execute that drive, and then they got nothing to lose at this point. Let's go for 2. Let's go for the win. Put the ball in Juwan Johnson's hands. Can't come up with it. Like, probably should have caught that.
I know the play was there. I still hate the sprint out on the goal line. I think you just cutting the field in half, minimizing your options. Anyway. Washington survives, and I think that's a way they had the game in control, like we said earlier, and to let the Saints back into it. Impressive job by Rattler and the Saints to get back, but Washington needed to hold on for that win. And then I don't know, a couple of the other games, but Dallas coming back, they're 6-8 now with the win over Carolina. Probably the worst we've seen from Bryce Young in a few weeks. A lot of fumbles, turnovers, and some spectacular plays from Cooper Rush in this game. Probably the best he's played since taking over as starter since Dak got hurt.
Yeah, Cooper Rush played really well. Bryce Young didn't play particularly well, and just because he kept turning the ball over. I mean, the man's ball security in this game was atrocious. That was the biggest problem in there. This game, by the way, would have been the previous game, by the Washington game. If they had lost that game, like if Juwan Johnson catches that 2-point conversion, they lose that game. That would have been very costly for Washington. Like, the Rams are a game back from them right now. Arizona is a couple of games back. Like, that would have been hugely damaging for a game that they're supposed to win. So massive bullet dodged, escaping with a W there. Yeah, it's a sign that, particularly with Micah Parsons back there, like, Dallas is still dangerous. They can still do damage. CeeDee Lamb can still make plays. Micah Parsons can still wreck your offensive line. If you turn the ball over when he does that, you're going to give them, short fields and opportunities to work with, and you need to be very good otherwise to claw back out of that hole, and the Panthers are not, so they weren't able to do it.
All right, man. As always, we can't touch on every game tonight during our live reaction, but we will tomorrow morning. I got to rest my voice up for tomorrow. My kids are screaming. Yeah. It's all happening. So tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. sharp, right here on YouTube, we'll be going through every single game, Week 15 review. Hit the subscribe, thumbs